Welcome back to the Optima Method, the podcast where structure creates freedom. Today, we're talking about something that almost every organization says they have figured out, but few actually do. We're talking about documentation. Every business says we have processes, we have procedures, we've got this documented. There is a training guide, but here's a reality. Most organizations do not have a true standard operating procedure. What they actually have is fragmented documentation, scattered notes, tribal knowledge, outdated screenshots, and expectations living in someone's head. And this is exactly where inconsistency is born. This is where one person thrives while the other person silently drowns because they're still trying to figure it all out. This is where departments become dependent on that one person who knows everything because they know how everything works. And this is where businesses confuse experience with structure, because structure should not depend on memory. It should be repeatable. It should be teachable. And most importantly, it should create success consistently, regardless of who is performing the task. So let's start with the biggest misconception about documentation. A lot of leaders genuinely believe they already have SOPs. But what you do is when you open one of those documents, you usually see something like this. Run payroll on Friday, send onboarding paperwork, update the spreadsheet, process invoices, or even just follow up with a client. That is not an SOP. That is a task list. And there is a massive difference. A true SOP walks someone through what the purpose of the task is, why it matters, what systems are being used, what success looks like, what decisions need to be made, what exceptions could occur. Most documentations tell people what to do. Very few teach people how to successfully do it. And that gap right there, that is where operational failure begins. A lot of organizations unintentionally create what I call it the figure it out culture. Someone new joins the team and gets a folder, a few documents, maybe a couple screenshots, some bookmarks, a rush training session, and a sentence where what we've all heard before. Don't worry, you'll pick it right up. And what happens? That employee starts piecing things together based on observation, assumptions, habits from previous jobs, or whatever version of the process the trainer or their team lead personally follows. Now imagine this across an entire organization. Every person starts performing the same task differently. One employee names files one way, while another one stores it somewhere else, even maybe on their personal hard drive. One follows up with customers within 2 hours, another one waits 3 days. One checks quality before submitting the work. The other one assumes that AI did it for them and that someone else will review it for them. And leadership starts wondering, why is everything inconsistent? And listen, customers feel that inconsistency as well, because there was never a true operational standard established in the first place. Documentation without structure creates anxiety. This is something people do not talk about enough. Poor documentation creates stress, not because employees are incapable, because you hired the right person, but because they are operating without clarity, without the proper training, without the proper documentation. When people do not know what success looks like, what steps comes next, who owns what, and where to find information, they spend most of their day trying to avoid making mistakes. And that is exhausting and not fair to them. And eventually, two things happen. Some individuals stand out because they naturally create their own systems. And these are the people who build the trackers, organize the folders, take detailed notes, create personal checklists, and become operational dependable. But here's the dangerous part. The business often makes mistakes because this is not a healthy operation. In reality, the organization is surviving because of individual structure, not the organizational structure. Meanwhile, everyone else is struggling silently. They feel behind, they feel confused, they're overwhelmed, they're unclear, not because of the lack of talent, but because the system itself lacks clarity. So one of the things that I always focus on is documenting the different steps for consistency, making sure that the standard operating procedure is set up in a way that everyone can follow. And if somebody is utilizing the documentation, I always ask for feedback because it may make sense to me, but it may not make sense to them, and making sure that there's clarity so that way the next person can take that document and actually do the task consistently. That is extremely important for efficiency, but also for customer success. Now, there is a difference between high performance performers and supportive performers. This is a conversation leaders need to hear because a lot of businesses accidentally build environments where only naturally structured people succeed. And that is not scalable leadership. A strong organization should not require employees to figure it out to survive. That is not fair to them. They are not set up for success. It should guide them towards success. And by having the documentation and the process in place, they're able to be successful on their own. Think about this. If two people start the same role, one succeeds immediately while the other one struggles. Leaders often assume the difference is the motivation or even just as simple as the capability. But sometimes the difference is simple. One person knows how to build their own structure internally. They know how to ask the certain questions to be able to be successful. The other person may need the operational guidance externally, or they may not know what to ask or because they don't know what is available. And there's nothing wrong with that. And that's why SOPs exist. True SOPs level the playing field. They reduce dependency on memory, personality, experience, and informational knowledge transfer. They create consistency regardless of who's performing the task. And by having the SOPs in place, they're able to learn, they're able to be successful, and they're able to build that confidence to become that knowledgeable person. Tribal knowledge is not a strategy. Every organization has them. They have those go-to people, the ones everyone depend on, the people who know where files are, how systems work, who to contact, what exceptions exist, or even how to fix problems. And while these employees are valuable, this becomes incredibly dangerous, like operationally. Because if your process only works when certain people are present, what happens when they go on vacation? What happens when they leave? You do not have a process documented. You have dependency. And a dependency creates risk. Because here, now this person leaves, or they get promoted, or they go on vacation. Now everything slows down because that knowledge was never operationalized. It stayed trapped inside people's heads and are failing of being transformed into scalable structure. Now, what does a true SOP actually look like? A true SOP is not complicated. It's not complicated because it's corporate. It's detailed because it's intentional. A real SOP should answer, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Who owns it? What happens? What are the tasks that need to be accomplished? And what does success look like? And most importantly, could a new employee realistically follow this process and succeed? That becomes the real test. Not does the documentation exist, but can somebody execute confidently and consistently because of it? The emotional cost of poor operations. Now, this is a topic that is deeper than process because operational chaos affects people emotionally too. When people constantly feel unclear, reactive, unsupported, or even afraid to ask questions, confidence starts disappearing. Then business starts seeing it. They start seeing the disengagement. They start seeing the frustration, the low accountability, missed deadlines, the finger pointing, and the burnout. And leadership often responds by adding more meetings, more pressure, more oversight, more micromanaging, or even more people. But the real issue is usually the structure because people cannot consistently perform inside inconsistent systems. This is why structure creates freedom. This is why I always say it. And I know I'm going to keep repeating it Structure creates freedom, not restriction, not micromanagement, freedom. Because when people clearly understand expectations, ownership, workflows, timelines, and even just the simple standards, they operate with confidence. They stop guessing. They stop recreating work. They stop depending on memory. And they finally have the mental capacity to focus on improvement instead of survival. That is what operational maturity looks like. Now, here are 3 ways to identify if your business has real SOPs. 1, if every employee explains the process differently, there is inconsistency. So here's what you can do today. Ask 3 employees how a task is completed. If you get 3 different answers, you do not have a standardized process. You have individual habits masquerading as operations. The next one is training dependence on certain people. If onboarding success depends entirely on shadowing, verbal explanation, or learning from Sarah, your process is not operationalized. A true SOP should reduce dependency on tribal knowledge. So if you're having somebody shadow or go through verbal explanations, start documenting the onboarding process for that particular task. The third one is where employees are afraid to make mistakes. When people constantly second guess themselves, it often means expectations are unclear, decision paths are undefined, or the process lacks structure. If deadlines are being missed, if they keep asking questions over and over again, or even the same questions over and over again, that means that this particular person needs additional help. Not because they are not smart and not because they're incapable. It's because they just need that extra guidance. Confident teams are usually structured teams. So make sure that the team has what they need to be successful in their role. And here are my final thoughts. Businesses do not fail because people are incapable. Many fail because expectations were never operationalized clearly enough for people to succeed consistently. Documentations alone is not enough. A shared drive is not enough. A checklist is not enough. But a true SOP creates clarity, consistency, accountability, scalability, and confidence. And when organizations finally make the shift from scattered documentation to intentional operational structure, everything changes. Communication improves, training improves, accountability improves, but most importantly, performance improves. Because people finally know what success actually looks like. Again, thank you for joining me for another episode of the Optima Method. If this episode made you realize your organization may have documentation but not a true operational structure, you are not alone. Most businesses are operating this way without even realizing it. But the good news is this: structure can be built, processes can be clarified, teams can be aligned, and operational chaos can absolutely be transformed into consistency. Because at the end of the day, structure creates freedom. If this episode resonated with you, share it with a leader, manager, or business owner who needs to hear this. Follow the podcast on whatever platform you're at. Follow me on Instagram for more information, but also download my master SOP. It's only $27 to get you started and build that organization. And as always, keep smiling, keep building the systems that allow people and businesses to succeed consistently. I'll see you in the next episode.